My name is Alara Quinn West, 32 years old. Christmas used to mean holding my breath for 3 hours while people who claimed to love me rehearsed a version of our family, where I didn't exist unless my wallet did. This year, I promised myself I'd sit, smile, sip the wine I brought, and leave before dessert. No speeches, no rescues, no quiet transfers to keep the peace like a good daughter who understands her role. The table was magazine perfect, ham lacquered to a mirror, potatoes whipped into clouds, candles trying too hard. My father rose halfway through the meal with that familiar, inflated calm he wore before an announcement. Fork in one hand, glass in the other, he cleared his throat like a podium had sprouted under him. "Let's raise a glass to Emily," he said. "She's never taken a penny from anyone. Pure self-made." Applause burst like a studio audience button had been pushed. Even Aunt Denise, who lent Emily $5,000 once and never saw it again, clapped as if her mortgage depended on the sound. My mother smiled the kind of smile you use to push a narrative uphill. Emily tilted her head and took it like a crown, eyes glassy with practiced gratitude. I sipped my wine and watched myself floating on the surface like a reflection I didn't recognize. I didn't plan to say it. I planned to leave with my tongue bitten clean. But quiet only works when it isn't used as a weapon against you. "Great," I said, setting my glass down. "Then she won't miss the $11,000 I've been quietly paying toward Dad's business loan, and the rent, and the phone, and the car repairs." The fork fell first, my father's, metal clink against plate, the sound of a dropped mask. Laughter cut out mid-note. Emily's smile froze and cracked at the edges. My mother's face didn't move. Only the muscles around her eyes tightened like drawstrings. No one spoke for 5 seconds. Then the room flooded. "What are you talking about?" my father demanded, the warmth gone from his voice like someone opened a window in a snowstorm. So I told them. 2 years ago, when his HVAC company was bleeding contracts, he came to me privately because asking the family was too embarrassing. He needed help restructuring a loan, promised to pay me back by spring. Spring slipped, then a year, then 2. Each time I asked, carefully, respectfully, he waved me off like I was dramatic. Meanwhile, Emily needed help with rent last summer, $12,200. Then $500 for car repairs. Then $300 when she lost her phone. The same year my parents flew to Aruba because self-care is important. I had receipts and the taste of iron in my mouth. Uncle Paul stared at his plate like it might confess something. Cousin Tyler looked like he was trying not to grin. Emily found her voice. "You're trying to ruin me," she said, not crying yet, just calibrating for effect. "You couldn't stand Dad complimenting me for once." "For once," I echoed and felt my pulse smooth out. "I'm done paying for applause tracks." My mother finally breathed. "Alara, we don't air dirty laundry at Christmas." "You turned me into the laundry," I said, "and I'm done being wrung out for a look." I stood. I thanked Denise for dinner, Tyler for carrying in the wine, Paul for fixing the wonky chair last year that no one else noticed. I kept my tone even because rage is the only emotion they're prepared to handle. Calm terrifies them. "I'm leaving early," I said. "I'm ending my year clean. No more ATM daughter. No more secret payoffs to keep the story pretty. I won't be here next Christmas." "Dramatic," my father said. "Ungrateful," my mother added, right on cue. Emily leapt from her chair into a full-throttle monologue about image and betrayal, words rising and overlapping like a bad symphony. I didn't stay for the crescendo. Coat on, scarf looped, I walked out into air that felt like honesty. In the driveway, frost climbed my windshield in lace, and for the first time in years, I felt the strange lightness that comes from not volunteering for my own erasure. Freedom tastes like copper at first. You have to acclimate. In the quiet of my car, I watched my breath cloud and disappear, and considered texting an apology purely out of reflex. I didn't. I drove home with the radio off and the road clicking under my tires, and every click sounded like the word no. I didn't hear from them for 3 weeks. That alone was a record. The silence sat across from me at breakfast, like a guest who might be kind or might be planning something. I decided to treat it like kindness. New Year's Eve, I made a small dinner for one, poured a good bourbon, and wrote down resolutions I wanted instead of rules they needed. Stop subsidizing bad behavior. Stop accepting crumbs labeled family. Stop translating love out of ledger entries. On the second Saturday of January, noon sunlight pooled on my kitchen tile. A knock sounded at the door, rare in my quiet Denver neighborhood where people text before they appear. Through the peephole, they looked like a dysfunctional Christmas card. My parents in winter coats, composed and brittle. Emily in sunglasses, though the sky was dull. My mother held a plastic bag of store-bought cookies like an alibi. My father wore that smile he saves for asking something awful and calling it reasonable. I opened the door but didn't step back. "We need to talk," my father said, and walked past me anyway. They always forget thresholds are choices, not hallways. They chose my living room without permission, arranged themselves in their usual tableau. Dad at the edge of the couch, Mom perched like a nervous bird, Emily curled in the big chair, performing teenage at 29. They began with liturgy, misunderstandings, forgiveness, family first, moving forward. I could feel the pitch building underneath, the one that lures you into the old contract where you pay to be considered. Then Emily cut to the part she'd rehearsed. "You owe us a second chance after everything we've done for you." I laughed before I could help it. The sound startled even me. "What you've done for me," I repeated, tasting each word. My father exhaled through his nose. Decision made. "We need to borrow your car," he said. "Just for a few weeks. Our second one's in the shop." Emily totaled hers. "Your mother needs ours for appointments. Yours just sits since you work from home. Win-win." "No," I said, clean and fast. "It's mine. I paid for it. I insure it. No one's touching it." That's when the performance cracked into something feral. My father stood and paced, the room shrinking around him. Emily accused me of being selfish. My mother asked how I could be so cruel after all their sacrifices. My mouth tasted like old pennies. "We're done," I said, pointing to the door. "Conversation's over." Maybe I shouldn't have left the room to grab my phone. Maybe I should have stood between them and anything with wheels. But I've always been slow to believe they'll do what they'll do. When I came back, the living room was empty. So was the driveway. I called. No one answered. I texted. Nothing. Finally, a ping. "Emily, you'll get it back when you stop acting like a stranger." A stranger to people who only knew me as a convenient account. I sat in the doorway and let the cold find my bones. A few hours passed like a bad dream. I called again, voicemail to voicemail, and felt the old training kick in. Don't escalate. Solve it within the family. Swallow the thing so nobody else has to see. I stood up, looked around my quiet house, and realized swallowing is how I vanished. That night, I reported the car stolen. The officer on the phone didn't laugh or scold or ask me to reconsider because they're your parents. He took the make, model, plate, and asked better questions than anyone in my family has ever asked me. "If they don't return it," he said, "it becomes criminal, family or not." 2 days later, he called. They'd found my car at a strip mall 20 minutes away, parked outside a salon. Emily had been using it to commute. Registration, my name, insurance, me, history, on file now. He asked if I wanted to press charges. My hands shook, but not from fear, from relief. "Yes," I said. The next morning, they arrested my father. My mother screamed a liturgy of names in the driveway while neighbors watched. My father said nothing. The judge gave him a week in county. 7 days is nothing and everything. It's not vengeance. It's a line. When he got out, he didn't come himself. He sent Emily. She hammered the screen door with her words before I even unlatched it. "You humiliated him. He's our father. You had him locked up like a criminal." I opened the door enough for my voice to pass through. "He committed a crime." For once, she didn't seem certain of her script. She spat out, "You think this changes anything?" and stormed off. It did. Not the way she meant. Word moved faster than apologies ever do. Uncle Paul called to check in, said he'd been rooting for me for years. Tyler texted a single thumbs up that felt like a standing ovation from one person who mattered. Even Aunt Denise sent, "About time someone stood up to them." I allowed myself, for the span of an evening, to believe it might be over. That I had survived the loudest part, that they would retreat to their idea of grace, which is just silence when the audience isn't clapping. I slept through the night for the first time in months. 4 days later, tires crunched my driveway at 9:02 a.m. I looked out. My parents. A thick folder in my father's hands. Sunglasses on my mother like she was headed to a funeral for the truth. I stepped outside in pajamas. coffee scalding my palm, and met them on the porch. "We need to settle this," my father said. He opened the folder and unfolded a stapled agreement printed on thin paper. "You'll drop future charges, stop defaming the family, and apologize publicly at the next gathering. In return—" "What do I get?" I asked. "The car," he said. I looked at the Ford, idling in the street. "Where is it?" They looked at each other. My father lowered his gaze. "We sold it." The coffee steadied in my hand. "You what?" "We needed a bigger vehicle," he said, reasonable as gravity. "Your mother's knees. The Civic was just sitting. We used it as a down payment on an SUV. It's in Emily's name." He produced a check. The amount was so far below my car's value that anger didn't even have a place to land. I handed it back. "You just added grand theft, auto, and fraud," I said. "I'll be calling my lawyer." My mother finally cracked through the composure. "You're turning on your own blood. You're destroying everything we built. You'll regret this when the inheritance comes up." And then she said their nuclear line. "There's a clause in your grandfather's will about family unity. You keep this up, none of us get a dime." I watched their words bluff themselves into monsters and felt something curious, calm. They didn't know what I knew. Grandpa didn't write weapons into his will for abusers to wield. He wrote safeguards. I didn't say any of that. I let them leave proud of their performance and their paper and their counterfeit check. When the street swallowed their car, I went inside, sat at my kitchen table, and made 3 calls. To Aunt Denise, to Uncle Paul, to Tyler. Then one more to Grandpa's old lawyer. Some families trade in affection. Mine trades in paperwork. And I was done signing anything that made me disappear. Grandpa never loved a lecture, but he loved a ledger. When I was 28, he asked me to help him set up online banking. We spent 2 Saturdays sorting scanned documents into neat desktop folders named like chapters: taxes, insurance, estate. He wasn't sentimental about it. "Paper tells the truth when people won't," he said, sliding a mug of coffee toward me as if signing a treaty. I didn't know then that the sentence would become a door I'd open 4 years later with shaking hands. After my parents left my porch, waving their counterfeit contract and that insult of a check, I dialed numbers I trusted. Aunt Denise answered first. She'd always had a quiet suspicion that things didn't add up, like a woman who hears a faucet running in someone else's house. I told her everything: the Christmas toast, the secret loan, the car, the arrest, the unity clause, as evenly as I could. She exhaled like steam leaving a pipe. "I'm listening," she said, "and I believe you." Uncle Paul was next. Practical, dark-humored, allergic to performance. He'd seen too much to be shocked. "I'll keep my ears open," he said, "and my mouth shut until it matters." Then I called Tyler. Cousin, paralegal, human search engine. He didn't have access to Grandpa's file, but he knew the lawyer who did, a man Grandpa had used for decades who still practiced out of a brick office that smelled like dust and loyalty. Tyler texted me the number. I stared at it for a beat, then pressed call. "Hamilton and Pierce," a receptionist said, brisk but not unkind. 2 transfers later, I was on the line with Mr. Hale, the kind of attorney who speaks in measured sentences and never wastes a word. "Ms. West," he said after listening to my summary, "there is indeed a unity clause, but it isn't the cudgel your parents are describing." "Then what is it?" I asked. "A safeguard," he said. "Your grandfather amended the will 2 years before he passed. The clause states that any beneficiary found guilty of financially exploiting another family member, loans disguised as gifts, property misappropriation, coerced transfers, inheritance intimidation, forfeits their share. The addendum is quite explicit. It names individuals based on documented incidents submitted to me at the time." Silence settled between us, clean as a cut. "Names?" I asked, voice steadier than I felt. "There are 2, he said. Your father," he read the full legal name, "and your sister, Emily." He paused, then added, "Your name is not listed. Your grandfather was concerned about the burden placed on you." The kitchen tile under my feet felt suddenly colder, like my body had moved while I'd been standing still. "So, if the clause is enforced—" "It is enforceable," he said gently. "If the conditions are met, their shares are reallocated among the remaining beneficiaries. That decision isn't yours to push, Ms. West, but you can supply evidence if asked. I suggest you document everything: dates, texts, reports." "I already have," I said, and glanced at the folder on my table, a life-sized paper spine. When we hung up, I called Noah. We'd started as something casual, coffee after rock climbing, late night ramen, a shared impatience for people who used apology as a clock you wait out. He was my boyfriend now, a word that felt strange in my mouth for how simple it was. He picked up on the second ring. "Tell me," he said, the way some people say hello. I did. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't hand me rage or forgiveness like options on a menu. He said, "I'll be here after you do what you have to do," and I understood what kind of man he was. Later, Maya, Noah's ex, sent me a DM I didn't ask for, a tidy little grenade meant to roll under my door. Maybe if you weren't so dramatic, his family wouldn't hate you. Some of us know how to keep peace. Her profile picture was a champagne glass. Emily followed her last year. Of course they were connected. I didn't respond. I took a screenshot and filed it under context, because paper tells the truth even when it's pixels. I invited a small circle to my living room 2 nights later. Denise, Paul, Tyler, and 2 cousins who'd learned the performance and quietly stopped clapping. I put coffee on and set out store-bought cookies just to see if I could reclaim them from the alibi my mother used them as. When everyone had settled, I didn't rehearse a speech. I just laid out the story like a map. The loan and the spring that never ended, the transfers labeled help, the arrest, the agreement, the sold car, the threat about the will. Then I placed the folder in the middle of the coffee table like a centerpiece fact. Tyler spoke next, careful as a witness. He'd printed the clause from the validated will and highlighted passages. "This isn't about family harmony," he said, tapping the paper. "It's about penalizing exploitation. Grandpa wasn't interested in fake unity. He wanted to stop patterns that break people." Denise nodded, hands clasped, like she was afraid if she unlatched them, grief would fall out. "He told me he was tired of watching the same 2 take and call it love," she said. "I didn't know he changed the will. I'm glad he did." Paul leaned back and let out a long breath. "Well," he said, "that's that." We didn't toast. No one hugged. It wasn't a victory. It was a temperature returning to normal. When they left, the house felt larger, like I'd knocked down a wall I couldn't see before. 3 weeks later, formal envelopes reached mailboxes like slow lightning. Notice of enforcement. The estate had reviewed evidence, including the police report, transaction records, and a history I didn't know Grandpa had already provided, and ruled that my father and Emily were disqualified under the clause. 6 figures each, gone. Reallocated to the remaining beneficiaries. There was nothing to appeal. Grandpa had made sure of that. My voicemail filled with static. My mother's first message arrived in a flood of caps. "You think this is over? You ruined everything. Your father lost clients. Emily's friends won't talk to her. You destroyed our family." I didn't reply. Emily posted a cryptic status an hour later about betrayal and fake relatives. A cousin replied, "Maybe don't steal from your own sister next time." The post disappeared, like all things built for optics. Dad's message came last, quiet and strangled. "I didn't know it would go this far," he said. "I thought you were bluffing. Be an adult and take the high road. Fix this." He sounded smaller than I'd ever heard him, like the world had finally refused to hold him at his preferred height. I didn't call back. Some words you can only answer in what you do next. I moved apartments. 2nd floor, better locks, sunlight that stayed longer on the walls. Noah and I carried boxes up the stairs at midnight, laughing at our own bad technique, sweating out the old house. He slept on the floor that first night, hand on my ankle like a promise without performance. In the morning, I made coffee while he found the toolbox. "Do you want me to change the door hardware?" he asked. "Or do you want to?" I said I did. He held the screws while I threaded each one in. The click of the latch was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in years. For a month, nothing happened. I cooked for friends and didn't count receipts in my head. Denise sent a photo of a new plant on her windowsill with the caption, "Look, I kept something alive." Tyler texted me memes that would make a judge laugh. Even Paul softened and mailed me a book with a note. "Margins are for ownership. Write in it." One Thursday, I stepped out with a travel mug and a reusable bag, thinking about groceries and passwords, and stopped. My parking spot was empty. I blinked once, twice, the way you do when you think your eyes might be lying to protect you. I called the city. No tows. I called insurance. No repossession. I knew before my thumb lifted from the screen. I went to my neighbor's place, retired, meticulous, a man who considered surveillance a hobby and community service. "Of course," he said, already queuing up the footage. At 6:42 a.m., a familiar Ford slid into the lot like a ghost replaying itself. My father got out wearing that same unearned calm, my mother scanning the street as if cameras were gossip. He used a spare key I didn't remember existed. The doors popped like they'd always belonged to him. He drove my car away, again. I didn't pace. I didn't call my mother to negotiate reality. I sat on my couch where the morning light drew a bright rectangle and pressed the number I'd saved under Officer Alvarez. He sounded tired, but not surprised when he recognized my voice. "Do you want to press charges again?" he asked. "Absolutely," I said, "and this time I won't be answering any calls that tell me to be a good daughter." He took the report. I sent the video. I texted Noah. "They took the car again. I'm okay. I've got it." He replied with one line. "I believe you. I'm on my way after work if you want me there." By sunset, the car was located outside a strip mall near Emily's apartment. The plates hadn't even been swapped. The arrest was swift because some stories eventually stopped needing an explanation. Dad was booked again. This judge wasn't interested in warnings. 7 days, no bail. My mother didn't show. Emily didn't either. I stood by my window that night and watched the city walk its dogs, carry its takeout, live its ordinary lives. Peace wasn't quiet in that moment. It was a steady hum, the sound of something finally holding. The next morning, Uncle Paul called. "Enough's enough," he said. He and Denise and 3 other relatives were adding a clause to their wills: anti-exploitation, automatic disqualification, 0 votes needed. "Your grandpa had the right idea," Paul said. "We just needed reminding." Emily found out within 48 hours and showed up at Denise's driveway, screaming as if volume could rewrite contracts. Denise didn't open the door. She called the police and went back to watering her plant. The scene fizzled out like a sparkler in rain. The well had finally dried. No money, no leverage, no audience. That should have been the end. But endings don't announce themselves. They arrive like a room getting warmer, gradual, undeniable. I changed my locks again, not because I was afraid, but because rituals matter. I put the recovered spare key in my desk, not to use, but to look at sometimes as an artifact of a story I no longer live inside. Maya sent one more message, a polished apology that wasn't for me so much as for the ghost of herself she admired. I archived it. Noah made omelets while I read out loud from Paul's book, writing in the margins like someone who planned to keep things. On my nightstand, the folder of documents thickened with closure. Paper telling the truth, the way Grandpa promised it would. I slept. Deeply. For the first time in years, I didn't dream of doors. 8 months later, I stopped measuring time by who apologized and started measuring it by how the light moved across my walls. Mornings were slow now. Coffee that actually stayed warm. Windows I could leave open without expecting headlights or yelling. Denver thawed early that spring, and with it, something inside me did too. My parents had gone silent, not the performative kind meant to bait guilt. Real silence, the kind that feels like a wall where a door used to be. I didn't kid myself into thinking it was remorse. It was exhaustion. Their theater had lost its funding. Emily, on the other hand, still tried for encores. I'd see flashes of her on social media, new selfies with old captions. Resilience. Renewal. Rebirth. She'd found a new boyfriend, a personal trainer named Hunter, who looked like a walking ad for denial. I scrolled past without judgment. Pity is a currency I don't carry anymore. Noah asked me once, halfway through a lazy Sunday breakfast, "Do you ever think about forgiveness?" I took a sip of coffee and answered carefully, "Not as a gift, more like a security setting. I can forgive enough to keep living, but not enough to let them back in." He nodded, then reached across the table and tapped my wrist, where the skin still held faint scars from teenage stress habits. "You're getting good at locking the right doors," he said. The world didn't shift dramatically after the arrests. It just started making sense. Uncle Paul's clause spread through the family like quiet reform. By summer, 5 relatives had notarized copies of similar addendums. Denise joked, "We're the Anti-Theft Coalition," and Tyler printed everyone new binders labeled Legacy, Not Leverage. It became family lore. Our way of inoculating future generations against manipulation disguised as tradition. I didn't celebrate the downfall. I just noted the absence of damage. That was enough. One afternoon, while sorting mail at my new apartment, I found a thick envelope with my mother's handwriting. No return address, but the loops and careful pressure were hers. For a second, I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity is stubborn, and sometimes closure needs evidence. Inside was a letter written on lined paper, too formal for sincerity. Ilara, it began. I know you think you've won, but there are things you don't understand about what we've been through. You humiliated your father. You destroyed Emily's confidence. Families are supposed to forgive. Someday you'll regret making enemies of blood. No apology, no acceptance, just guilt repackaged as grief. I folded it neatly, slid it into the old folder with every other document, and wrote one word across the top in pen. Pattern. That weekend, I took the folder downtown to Mr. Hale's office. The same room that once smelled like dust now smelled faintly of cedar. He smiled faintly when he saw me. "Ms. West," he said, "I was wondering when you'd stop collecting and start closing." I handed him the folder. "This is the rest," I said. He nodded, set it aside without opening it. "I don't need to read it," he said. "You already know how it ends." "How's that?" "With peace," he said simply, "and a paper trail strong enough that no one can rewrite your truth." Outside, the sky broke open with that particular Denver light that turns every reflection into glass. I walked to my car, and sat for a while before starting it. There's a stillness that comes after surviving a storm of your own blood. It's not joy, it's alignment. Every sound feels sharper, every silence earned. A month later, Denise hosted a small dinner, the first one that didn't require apologies as a ticket. Real laughter filled the room, the kind that isn't afraid of being overheard. Paul grilled, Tyler brought wine, and Noah stood beside me like he belonged there, not as a savior, but as witness. At one point, Paul raised his glass and said, "To Ilara, for proving that truth doesn't need to shout." I smiled, half embarrassed. "To Grandpa," I corrected, "for writing better endings than we deserved." Everyone laughed, and for a second I saw what family could look like when no one was performing. Later that night, alone again, I opened the folder one last time. Pages of receipts, police reports, screenshots, letters, my history reduced to proof. I lit a single candle and began feeding each sheet to the flame. The paper curled and folded into itself, glowing, whispering away. When the last page turned to ash, I closed the window and whispered into the dark. Paper told the truth. Now it can rest. In the months that followed, I caught myself waiting for the next crisis, the next intrusion. But it never came. No doorbells, no pounding fists, no demands disguised as concern. The quiet stayed. I learned to stop flinching at it. Emily resurfaced online once more, engaged again, to a man twice her age who owned a yacht club. The caption read, "Some people never change. I'm not some people." Comments were limited. I smiled, not out of spite, but clarity. Patterns repeat until someone refuses to dance. On the anniversary of the Christmas that started it all, I visited Grandpa's grave. Snow covered the grass, in clean lines, the kind of silence that hums. I brushed off the headstone and set down a small folder, not with documents, but with photos. The dinner at Denise's, my new apartment, Noah smiling over breakfast. "Paper tells the truth when people won't," I said softly. "You were right. But I finally found people who do." The wind answered with a kind of gentleness that felt like closure. That night, I left my porch light on. Not for them, for me. Because peace, when you finally own it, deserves to be seen. I didn't win a war. I ended one. And the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was mine.